Shalom, everybody, on this very warm day in Texas. What a crazy year it's been so far. It's wild. The virus, then other kinds of diseases appearing, shootings, riots, an election year. Wow. A lot of instability, it seems. And I want to, in keeping that in mind, I want to share with you a little bit of a word from the prophet Isaiah, chapter 51, the first couple of verses, which read like this. Isaiah 51, verse 1 and verse 2. Listen to me, you pursuers of righteousness, you who seek Adonai. Consider the rock from which you were cut, the quarry from which you were dug. Look to Abraham, your father, and Sarah, who gave birth to you. In that I called him when he was only one person, then blessed him and made him many. Two verses that are very interesting, coming at a time when God is using the prophet Isaiah to help Israel find its way, and during confusing times and difficult times, even times when Israel might be looking in a different direction other than to the Lord. So he says, listen to me, those of you who pursue righteousness, and I hope that's all of us who are watching this video. That's what we need to pursue. We need to pursue our God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and his righteousness. Those of us who consider Adonai, look to the rock. Consider the rock. What's the rock? Well, ultimately, I believe that rock is our Messiah, Yeshua. But in this context and in these verses, it says, look to Abraham, your father. Let's stop there right for a moment. Let's just stop right there. Look to Abraham, your father. Who is Abraham, our father? Well, Abraham's a very interesting guy. He's called the friend of God. He is the original faith guy. In other words, when the Bible, the Brit Chadashah as well as the Tanakh, when the New Testament looks at Abraham, they call him the man of faith, or the one where faith originates. Because, why is that? Because in Genesis chapter 15, verse 6, we read these words. Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him as righteousness. And those words are quoted on a number of occasions in the Brit Chadashah, in the New Testament. One of those occasions is found in Galatians chapter 3, verses 6 through 9. I'll read these to you. Even so, Abraham believed God, and it was reckoned to him or counted to him as righteousness. So how did God count righteousness to Abraham? He believed God. He trusted in the Lord. What was this trust all about? God said, you're going to have offspring that are so numerous, it'll be like counting the stars or the sands of the sea. And Abraham was an old guy by then, at this point. And he had no offspring. But when God spoke that word to him, Abraham believed God, and it was counted to him or reckoned to him as righteousness. So Rav Shaul takes that and applies it to Jews and Gentiles alike. But here, especially in Galatia, he is writing to the Gentiles, and he says, even so, Abraham believed God, and it was considered or reckoned to him as righteousness. Therefore, be sure or be assured that it is those who are of faith, those who are of trust, in Yeshua, those who are of trust in God, who are sons of Abraham. Speaking to Gentiles. The scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel beforehand to Abraham, saying, in you all the nations will be blessed. All the goyim will be blessed. Genesis chapter 12, verse 3. So he's speaking to the Gentiles here, but it includes Jewish people as well, of course. And this is of particular interest concerning Abraham, because Abraham is now considered the one that everyone, Jews and Gentiles alike, look to in terms of the origins of faith or trust in the God of Abraham. And so in that way, it's universal. Jews and Gentiles alike need to trust in the Lord, exercise faith in God, particularly in and through Yeshua, our Messiah. And it's reckoned to us, not just to Abraham, but to us as well as righteousness, just as Rav Shaul was writing in Galatians chapter 3, and continues to write in the book of Romans, etc., and other places, and other places in the Brit Hadashah. But the scripture also says, look to Abraham your father, but it also says in Isaiah 51:2, verse 2, and Sarah. So it says, look to Abraham your father, but it also means look to Sarah, who gave birth to you. This makes it much more particular. So the seed of promise that came through Abraham, that Rav Shaul, the Apostle Paul, references in Galatians and Romans and other places, this seed of promise didn't just come through Abraham, but he makes it very specific. It came through his wife, Sarah. So the promised seed did not come through Abraham's concubine, and later their son, Ishmael, even though God said, I will bless Ishmael as well. But he's becoming very specific here. Your promised seed will come through Abraham and will come through Sarah, your wife. Let's read that in Genesis chapter 17, verses 18 through 21. And Sarah, he says that Sarah would give birth to the promised seed in Genesis 17. And Abraham said to God, oh, that Ishmael might live before you. But God said, no, but Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac, Yitzchak, which comes from the word laughter, which means laughter. And I will establish my covenant with him, with Isaac, an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. Isaac, Jacob, the 12 tribes. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob comes from this. As for Ishmael, God says, I have heard you, Abraham. Behold, I will bless him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall become a father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. My covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year. He's distinguishing very clearly that he wants to bless Abraham's son, Ishmael, but the promised seed, the one who would bring ultimately the promise of the Messiah, the promise and fulfillment of the land of Israel, that would come through Sarah. Rav Shaul speaks about this a little bit more in Romans chapter 9, verse 9. He says, "For this is the word of promise. At this time I will come and shall, and you shall have a son." Excuse me for moving this. It's covering up my notes. "For this is the word of the promise. At this time I will come and you shall have a son. And that son is through Sarah." That would be a miracle, because Abraham was about 99 years old, 100 years old, and Sarah 99, something like that, or 99 and 98. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, just bringing this to its conclusion and point, now Israel has been released from Egypt and crosses the Red Sea and experiences all these miracles. And after crossing the Red Sea, they're wandering through the desert, and there is a rock. And Moses, and actually God, but through Moses, brings water forth from this rock to help satisfy their thirst. And so Rav Shaul picks up on this and writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, "They all, that is all of Israel, wandering through the wilderness, drank the same drink from the Spirit. For they drank from a Spirit-sent rock, which followed them, and that rock was the Messiah." So look to the rock. That's the name of this little devotional, or this little short drash of encouragement to you, to all of us. Look to the rock. I just want to say to you, look to the rock, Yeshua. He's the rock that followed Israel through the desert, brought forth water, and quenched the thirst. Yeshua, the rock of our salvation, said to everyone, "Come to me and drink, and I will give you spiritual water, water that satisfies you forever." So look to the rock, Yeshua. He is steady. He is steadfast. If we look to him, we won't lose heart. A heart that faints because of instability or because of confusion or whatever it might be. Look to the rock. He will hold us steady, Yeshua. He will maintain and give us encouragement for our hearts. So bless you, be encouraged. I look forward to seeing you all sometime soon in person. God bless.